And we're
Uh,
live. Welcome to another episode of the Live Clean and Fight Dirty Show with your co-host Angelo Ferrer and your main host John Hackelman. Today, what is martial arts? Is it a sport? Is it hand-to-hand combat? The word martial is there implying military. Is it weapons training? This word is thrown around quite a bit online, and you'll see it attached to videos doing all sorts of things, from things that you might like to things you might hate. So, we're here with UFC coach John Hackelman to talk about what he feels defines martial arts. So, that being said, John, what's your definition of martial arts?
okay. Martial arts, to be considered a martial art, the main goal of your endeavor, and in say your dojo, the main goal at your dojo, if the main goal of your dojo is to incapacitate an attacker, and the word martial being military-like, warlike, whatever you want to call it. So the goal has to be, you have to incapacitate, stop the threat, hurt, whatever you want to call it, your attacker. Um, so like in karate, you want to knock them out, or in jujitsu, you want to choke them out, right? Um, Boxing, your main goal in that sport, it's a sport, but it's a martial, it's a sport. It's a combat sport. So we'll call them combat sports. Like jujitsu isn't a martial art, it's a combat sport because they're trying to choke their opponent, but the opponent's gonna tap. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a sport. Muay Thai, you can knock the guy out, right? Incapacitate him, and that's the goal. But there's a referee and there's rules, etc. So it's a combat sport, basically. MMA is the same. Your goal is to incapacitate the person, right? Either knock them out, choke them out, whatever. So that's combat sports. They're related to martial arts. They're the sport version of the martial arts. Now you got something like wrestling. Wrestling, your goal isn't incapacitating anyone, it's scoring more points or it's pinning someone. So to score more points, that's your goal. Pin somebody, those are your two goals. You're not trying to incapacitate them. You're not trying to hurt them, right? You could hurt them on a slam, but that's not your goal. You could hurt a guy in a football game with a hard tackle, but incapacitating him isn't your goal. Scoring touchdowns is. So now let's come back to a real art. So like a martial art is for the street, you're trying to incapacitate an attacker now. Okay. So, karate, some kung fu used to be like that. But a lot of it is just on points and flash and stuff like that. But anything, any system, any system that is put together where its main objective is to incapacitate an attacker, in other words, self-defense, basically, that's a martial art. If you're a sport that your goal is to incapacitate your attacker, that's a combat sport. That's a sport version of real fighting or of a real martial art. So it's kind of an offspring of martial arts. But football, you can really incapacitate someone. But like I said, the main goal is to score a touchdown. So it doesn't quite fit the criteria as a martial art, but there are martial art like qualities. You're trying to hurt people, slam them when you block them and check them and stuff. So there is that quality going, or that objective, but you don't have the criteria. The criteria of being a true martial art is your main objective is to incapacitate your attacker. So that's what I feel is true martial arts. And too many others get in there and they're just about points or, flash or something else. So they might call their system a martial art, but in reality, it's not really. Like if you do a couple of techniques, really good ones, but then you spend a lot of time doing fluff. So your main objective isn't really incapacitating people. A lot of people, gyms, their main objective is to do like fancy katas and shit like that, and then they do a little bit of real stuff on the side. But to be a true martial art, your main objective, your main goal in every fucking class should be incapacitate the attacker. Stop the threat. What do you think?
I think one of the things that always confuses me, even for me, I've been doing martial arts, well, less time than you have. But for a while, I've been doing martial arts for over 15, 20 years now. Um, art. The word art always, I get stuck on that. So I'm just going to ask you, what do you define as art in that term? Martial. To me, everything you've defined so far is very martial. Like I think martial, I think military, incapacitating my enemy, not even opponent, enemy, because they're trying to harm me or my family. So I'm trying to incapacitate them in any way I can.
Yeah.
The word art comes in there, and this is where I get kind of like, oh, well, okay, there's an art. When I think art, Van Gogh comes to mind, Picasso comes to mind, but fighting doesn't. So what's your definition of art in that? I guess I'll ask you.
We could Google it. You could look on Google. What's the word art? It's to me.
Do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
For me, it just
Okay.
means you're having a group of. It's like a system or a profession or a group of things you put together, and it's an art. I think that's an art. It's not like you're not a. I don't know.
Let's do this. So, art, by Wikipedia, just the word art, is a diverse range of human activity and is resulting product that involves creative or imaginative talent, generally expressive of technical proficiency, beauty, emotional power, or conceptual ideas. Now, in this definition, technical proficiency is what comes out to me in martial.
Well,
I don't know about beauty and emotional power, but like the two things that came up to me that really pop out are technical proficiency and conceptual ideas. So, since people come here to listen to what you have to say about stuff, what do you think? What would you say for martial arts and your definition that you just put together would qualify it for, if we're defining art as technical proficiency and conceptual ideas, how would you make a concrete example of that for your definition of martial arts?
um, I think. I mean, if you take it right off, if you take it right off the beginning, it's an application of human creative skill. You're right. It's a skill. We have to learn it. Um, you have to imagination. I don't. That's not as much, but you could use that. And it's to me, it's something that people can see your art. Like whether that's dancing or punching someone in the face. You can be a combative art, right? A martial art. Um, so, I mean, you can get, since there's an artiste, right, involved, you could think of an artist that draws and stuff, or you could just think of the martial art. You can think of the artist as somebody that wants to define and and display a bunch of an activity, a human activity, and it could be whether it's punching someone in the face that's beautiful. Some people love that. I mean, some people love to watch Ali. It's like they call it's an art form, right? And then you get Mike Tyson, brutal art form. People call it a brutal art form. It's you watch him knock people out. It's like art form. So it's somebody that's so good at their group of techniques or whatever, activities that person's doing. It's an art. So you could have a martial art. You could have a combat art. You could have a self-defense art. I mean, you could add art to anything. It might sound better to be like a martial system. That might sound better, martial system, but it's the same, and it's been called martial arts for a long time. So I think too many people get hung up, and they try to like. So martial art is really displaying activities, right? That human activities. It could be knocking someone out, choking them out, beautiful takedown into a punch, and beautiful choke into unconsciousness. That could be an art form. But the people that just want to like not really, they don't like they get scared of the roughness of it, and they get, oh, I don't want to, oh no, I want to do kata, and so they'll go from a combat art to just being artists, and they want to be an artist, and they don't like the other part. Well, guess what? You can be a fucking artist, but I'm sorry, if you're kata based more than fighting based, you can still be an artist, but I'm going to take away the martial.
And then the other interesting thing that you mentioned was football, right? So again, I was thinking this the other day, like I was thinking about athleticism and
Yeah.
combat sports and then martial arts, and I was kind of mulling around this idea that a really good football player who maybe perhaps hasn't exactly learned how to fight.
Yeah.
Again, no one lives in a vacuum. So you think football players at one point in their life threw a punch somewhere. Maybe they don't have a perfect punch, but they learned how to throw a punch somewhere. But like you said, they definitely learn how to run after someone, grab them, and throw them on the ground. Most
Right.
players practice that a lot. So even though quote unquote football is not a martial art,
No.
imagine someone who in a at a bar who's going to walk up to a linebacker and start a fight with them because the average person is not going to be the same size and the athleticism, just the presence that that kind of person brings into a room,
Right.
considered a deterrent right in itself.
Right. So a guy like that would be a great martial artist, but the sport that he plays is not a martial sport because they want to score points. They want to go across a line, right? A touchdown. So their goal isn't to hurt people, even though they can. I mean, a baseball player, give him a baseball bat in his fucking hand and try to, some home run hitter, let him crack somebody in the skull. That's a martial art right there. Okay, just doing that. While he's doing that and he's trying to hurt the guy, he's being involved in a martial art. But guess what? When he's swinging the bat at his game, he's trying to score runs. So the goal isn't to hurt. So anyone that's trying to hurt someone he's being martial, right? And some of his skills might be art, like, right? Like a tackler could be beautiful tackle where he could really hurt someone. That would be martial art. That alone, it could be a curriculum in a martial art. It's really similar to a running double leg, right? I've actually seen guys do running doubles and knock their opponent right out on the mat because your head smacks off the ground that much. So there's a lot of that. But then you give a baseball player a bat, now that what he's doing is a martial art. If he's doing it if his main goal is incapacitating his attacker, that he's participating in a martial art, swinging a bat. So you can, swinging a bat, a running tackle. There's things that could be considered martial art like, but sorry, their sport isn't a martial art. It's not a combat sport. And what they're playing isn't, what they're learning isn't a martial art. It's just not. But they're, not saying they can't kick butt and, shit like that, but they're not baseball and football are not martial arts. And like I said, either is wrestling for that matter. Wrestling, when you combine it with other things, I think it's probably one of the most important parts of a martial arts system. But in and of itself, if you just take freestyle wrestling, you're trying to pin or score points, it's not a martial art. It's a sport. It's not a combat sport. It's a sport.
And then like,
Well, you have to be trying to incapacitate, knock out, or choke out, or tap out your opponent.
And then the interesting thing about sports in general is that it could be argued that societies, as they started evolving away from attacking each other with swords and shields, right? The original like Greek games was a lot more martial art based. You actually had things that looked very similar to MMA with weapons and right. As societies evolved away from that, they wanted to continue to play their war games, and they ended up starting stuff like football and baseball. Football, especially football, the idea of trying to take over territory in small increments by fighting across a team of people. It's very, very like the concept there is it. You can see where it went, and of course, it turned into a sport, and we see the evolution of sports, and then it kind of loses that. But what are your thoughts on that? The way sports kind of start off as an idea of combat, but they eventually turn to a sport.
I've never thought of that except for like fencing or Hondo. What's it called? With the
Okay,
sword.
yeah, kendo.
What?
Kendo.
Kendo.
Yeah,
Or
very much.
like even karate has for the most part gone away from being a martial art and just been more of a kata art, and that would be like you're great at the katas, but I would be willing to bet the majority of karate schools out there spends more time on kata than real techniques. So they're kind of going away from the combat part of it or the martial part of it. And yeah, I never thought of then what's baseball if that's what football would be like. People on the line, they're trying to move forward.
Forward,
That that
they're holding a bat, like you just said. They're holding a weapon. So, like, so again, when you look at the history of sports, usually it's not the sport that we see now. Right? We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years. You keep looking back. It would take forever to do it in a 20-minute podcast, but it's interesting when you look at the history of sports. You start going back, and you'll always end up in some primitive era where originally it was something that had to do with killing someone. Like, if you keep going back enough, I believe basketball has some weird connection to Aztecs and heads. Like there's like I forgot what it was. I forgot, but there was like some weird connection to basketball and the idea that the Aztecs used to use their enemies' severed heads to play a sport. So like there's when you go back far enough, you'll find out that sports at one point are completely connected to a martial aspect, but as time went by, they got separated from that. And I think that when you look at sports today, like you said about karate, right? The idea
yeah.
that if I walked into a bar and I saw a linebacker sitting there and I saw a quote unquote karate guy, let's just say some karate guy was arrogant enough to walk into a bar with his gi on and a black belt and he's there having a beer, and he started some shit. I you
How many seriously, I've gone to restaurants, bars, movie theaters with my gi and my belt on. I used to catch the bus. I used to catch a bus when I was a kid with my gi on.
I might have to
Anyway,
I might have to go. I have to backpedal out of my story right here. But if I saw a karate guy in a white gi
my
with
gi, yeah.
out of place, and I had to choose, like, if you told me, hey, these two guys are gonna start a fight with you, who am I gonna not have a problem with? I don't have much of a problem with the karate guy, but I don't know, but that linebacker is a big problem.
Yeah. I might agree with that, but so with that said, I think a football player could be more. He could be portraying or engaging in a martial art if he's using his techniques to hurt someone else. But then when he goes on the field, he's not a martial artist. So there's a lot of people that are great fighters that when they're fighting, they're engaging in a martial art because they're trying to hurt the person, but they don't practice the martial art because football is not a martial art. Freestyle wrestling is not a martial art. Baseball is not a martial art. But now you give a fucking home run hitter a baseball bat and let him loose on some, fucking criminal. I bet you he'll be able to get the job done using his bat as a martial art. So you can use whatever you have as a martial art, but if you want to call a system a martial art, it's main goal, not side goal. Like football, one of the side goals is hurting the guy. They try to hurt people when they tackle them or block them. They try to hurt people. So they're engaging in a martial art activity when they're doing that. But now their goal in their sport, which is scoring points, crossing a goal, then it's not a martial art. It's a sport.
And then, which brings a question, right? If your quote unquote martial art is focusing so much on that art part that you are no longer engaging in the martial part, and suddenly a sport that doesn't even have martial arts in the word, like martial arts is nowhere in football, can make you more effective at martial arts. Like what's going on there, right? We have a few comments here. Zen says, to me, martial arts is to be bully proof. And Andy says, about to drive home from the dojo while listening to you guys. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for tuning in. Also, Zen mentions tomorrow is Benny Udriga's birthday. Are you going to call him or text him? So,
Benny the Jet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's his birthday.
I'll text him.
Probably give him a text.
I'll give him a text.
If anybody has any questions related to the topic, please feel free to say now. Or if you have any questions about anything else, feel free to mention it. We are getting close to our wrap up, and no one else has asked any questions. So I guess I'll ask a question. If you are in a martial art, you're in one of those schools that focuses a lot on the art, right? Maybe by default you live in the middle of nowhere, and all you have is what you would refer to as laundromat karate. How would you personally try to make it more effective for yourself? What would you recommend to this person who lives in some rural area that doesn't have access? This is just gonna, this is hypothetical because most people do have access to more, but they don't have access to more. What would you recommend to them if they're stuck in a program that's focusing on the art but they want to make it more martial? What would you recommend for that person to make it more martial and less artsy?
First of all, they depends on like if you give it like the percentage, like what percentage is really martial and what isn't. I'd say if it's anywhere near 50% that isn't, you'd be much better off in the long run to just practice with on YouTube or some kind of internet or some kind of online program. I think that would be a much better bet. But if it had a lot of good stuff, like say it was like 75% of it was drilling and sparring and learning real techniques that are going to work in the real world when you're really attacked and not phony katas and shit like that, then maybe pick up a lot of stuff on the internet and use that gym to at least have a body to spar with and drill with and just kind of zone out with the katas, or maybe even not show up on those days and not care about the belt, obviously. But if you just care more about the fighting, if they allowed you to skip that part, then like when I was coming up, I didn't like doing kata, and I told my instructor that, I said I don't want to do the kata, I don't like it. It's nothing. It's unrealistic, and it's not going to help me. I told him those exact words, and he said, "Shut the fuck up, do as you're told, and when you get your black belt, you don't have to do them anymore. But right now you do. See you later." So I kept doing. We hardly did katas at my gym where I was coming up anyway, but there was too much for as much as too much for me because I couldn't stand him at all. But he told me that I was like 12 years old. I was like 12 years old, and he looked right at me. He didn't even miss a beat, whatever he's doing. I was like, hey, Chief, I just don't like this kata. It's not good, and we're not gonna ever do this stance and that stance, and I don't want to do them. Can I just not do them? And he just said, without even skipping a beat, he goes, shut the fuck up, and you're gonna do them until you get your black belt. Then you don't have. He said, once you get your black belt, you never have to do them again. But right now, shut the fuck up and go do them. So that was my instructor. So
There's another there is another lesson behind all that. The idea of respect, and you're gonna do what the instructor tells you to do.
you know, it's funny because I have an issue with people that drink a lot. To me, drinking a lot is if I see you twice, if I see you twice in 6 months and you're drunk at either one of those two times, then you got a fucking problem. You need to go to fucking AAA or something. You need to get some therapy or some fucking.
Triple A is the insurance company, but yeah, A. You gotta go to AA.
No, AA is for guys that are just going. AAA is for guys that really need it. So I give them an extra fucking A. I always tell them that. But so I have guys like that, and it's like, it's the respect part. Is because if I don't like drinking. I don't want to be around a bunch of drunk, fucking weak people, right? But then some people like to get drunk once in a while, like when they're in between fights and stuff. That's a whole different ball of wax. But for that guy that isn't a fighter and just likes to get drunk because he hates his life so much, he wants to go into some alternate, experience, and you get that when you get drunk, right? So you don't like your life, so you try to be somewhere else, an altered sense of reality, because you want to do that as much as you can because you just want this shit to go away, your life. But so I don't like that kind of person. To me, that's a weak person, so I just don't like it. So to me, that should be enough if I say that. But it isn't, because there are some people. So I always think back to when I was training, how would I have handled this? And to me, Godin didn't like us drinking water, like on our breaks when we're training. And we were upstairs in Honolulu, Hawaii, on the second floor. Heat rises, and it was a tiny, like 600 square foot room, and it was hot. There's no windows, no windows. It was hot as shit. Okay, and guess what? He didn't like us drinking water. There was a little water fountain there. He told us not to drink water because water wasn't good if you're training because you can't lose weight and you get a side ache. So guess what? Guess what we didn't do? We didn't drink water. So, forget the alcohol. People can't even not drink alcohol because they're alcoholics, obviously. But if I wouldn't even drink water if my instructor told me not to, I had that much respect for him. If somebody can't drink alcohol when I tell them not to, there's no respect at all.
So good, yeah. There's that idea of respecting the person that you train with to listen to them, because by listening to them, at the end of the day, it will improve and reach you to your goal through that perseverance. Now, John Cox asks, how many styles have actually been applied in a life or death combat situation? That's kind of a difficult question to answer, but
what does that mean? I don't understand the question.
So, how many styles have actually been applied? In other words, how's this? I'll make this a little easier. Kind of browsing through the internet, how many videos have you seen where someone's defending themselves and they're actually using an actual style? For example, boxing or kickboxing or jujitsu or wrestling.
I've seen tons. I've seen tons of guys getting choked out. I've seen tons of guys getting knocked out with a right hook or a left hook. Is that boxing? Is that Muay Thai? Is that Kaju Kempo? Is that Hawaiian Kempo? Who has left hooks? Everybody does. That's like saying, you see a double leg. Is that a lot of people in jiu-jitsu now do double legs. Is that jiu-jitsu? Is it, wrestling? So there's been so many, it's morphed into so many different things. You just have your system. There's like no one system. What if the guy hits the guy with a baseball bat and kills him? What system was that? Baseball? It wasn't baseball. He just hit him in a baseball with a baseball bat. What if he does a running tackle? Did he just knock him out with football? Or did he just kill him with football? I don't know. I think you have a system, and if it has real martial qualities, and it should. And if it doesn't, then it shouldn't be a martial art. You shouldn't be training it. But if it is, you can't call it left hook. Are you going to call it boxing? What about a roundhouse kick? Is that Taekwondo? Is it Muay Thai? What about a front kick? Is that Shotokan? Is that, so it gets kind of cloudy with which is which. So, if your system is teaching you a system that's going to keep you safe in the street as much as possible, if the techniques you're learning are going to be applicable or effective or efficient to defend your life in the street, you should know. And so those techniques you're learning, there's no real label for them. It's just a left hook's a left hook, a rear choke is a rear choke, a guillotine is a guillotine. I mean, there's no real name. Nobody owns them. Like when you're beginning a fight, if you start, you play that music, that would be Muay Thai, right? But I mean, other than that, a leg kick, kickboxing is leg kick, Muay Thai is leg kicks, MMA has leg kicks. So to me, there is no one system that has certain things anymore. They might have brought them to the table years ago, but it's not theirs anymore. Like I love the left hook, but I can't say, oh, that's my left hook. He's using it.
You can't go online telling people, hey, you can't use that. That's my left hook. That's my intellectual property. You better send
that's the answer for that.
And I think one thing I can add to that is if you are studying a martial art and you do see a real fight, online is probably the best way to find it. But if for some reason you live in a violent neighborhood and you see fights like I used to growing up, you should see elements of whatever you're studying in that situation. If you don't, you might have a problem.
That's one of the great things I've had, and I'm so lucky, and not just lucky, good too, but mainly lucky, I'm going to say, but skilled too. But whatever, you know what I mean. Like I could teach my guys something and then watch them do it in the cage during that fight. I could teach my guys something, watch them do it in the ring and win the fight and go, and then my students that are learning that aren't on a fight team, but they're just, a doctor, lawyer, whatever they are, they're going, hey, we just did that technique last week. That was, so they get to see it. So that's a good thing to have.
Yeah, it's a great way to test it. Okay, well, last comment coming in here. And if anybody has any last comments, mention them now or forever hold your peace till next week at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Wednesday. Mitter99 says, sorry if this is off topic, but can a long-distance student earn a black belt at the Pit through I'll plug it in, the pit.tv online courses, online lessons available? Can they earn a black belt through that online program?
Yes.
There you go. Yes, you can. Your answer is yes, you can. Again, that's at thepit.tv. You can sign up for classes. You can audit a class. I always mention this. I mentioned this to one of my students the other day. I said, hey, if I didn't even mention for him to sign up. I was just talking about how you have the online classes. You can audit them. You can check it out. You can see what they're doing in the classes. You can practice at home. He's like, really? I thought I had to sign up to the course if I want to see no. I said, for the price of 2 cups of coffee a month, you can audit a class and see exactly. You can work out alongside of them. You won't earn a belt, but you can work alongside them. If you really like it, you can sign up and earn your belt. So, yes, it is that accessible. It is that easy. This has been another episode of the Live Clean and Fight Dirty show every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Don't let anyone take your lunch money, and we'll catch you next week.